Reggie Bush, a man widely regarded as one of the greatest college players to ever play the game of football. Bush was meant to transcend the game once he got to the NFL, with his explosive running ability, speed, and pass-catching prowess. This never really happened, and while I believe he did not meet the potentially unfair expectations set on him when he got into the league, I don't think he could be labeled a bust either. Or do I? I know I'm not alone in wanting to have Bush as my running back in Madden 07 when he became available, but when I think of his NFL career today, nothing really major stands out to me. So we will find out if my assumption is correct or if there was something that I wasn't seeing here, as the main thing I remember from his career was getting popped in the open by Sheldon Brown. Still, he did enough to not only be called a Super Bowl champion, but also managed his way into the New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame. So in this video, we will look into the career of USC legend Reggie Bush's time in the NFL to see how good he actually was. Reggie Bush was born on March 2nd, 1985 in Spring Valley, California. When Bush made it to the varsity team, he would score over 45 touchdowns and rush for over 3,500 yards. His explosiveness combined with his ability to catch the football landed him a 5-star rating and was ranked as the #1 running back in the nation in 2002. Bush received countless offers and essentially could have chosen to play anywhere, but ultimately decided on USC, where they had him doing everything on the field. By 2004, Bush was the offense. His 2004 run included rushing for 908 yards on a 6.2 yards per carry average, adding another 509 on 43 catches, and would average 25 yards per kick and 15 in punt return, adding 2 more touchdowns to boot. Once you add everything up, the rushing, passing, and return yards, Bush would accumulate 2,330 combined all-purpose yards. He would be the team's MVP and would finish 5th in Heisman voting. This 2004 campaign would be peak for most players, but Bush would still kick it up a notch for the 2005 season. Brace yourselves, y'all, because the numbers I'm about to mention would put your Madden stats to shame. Reggie would rush for 1,740 yards on 200 carries. That's an insane 8.7 yards per carry for the record. It doesn't stop there though, as he would add another 481 yards on 39 catches, and would add another 672 from returning both kicks and punts. Maybe some of these stats still somehow don't sound crazy, but let's also read through the averages. Bush averaged a total of 222 all-purpose yards per game, so wherever you put him, it didn't matter. At the end of the day, you were expecting at least 200 yards out of this guy. Put it in perspective, 200 yards a game. One specific game against Fresno State, the man would compile an insane 513 all-purpose yards. If you have more yards in a game than El Salvador's area code, which is 503, you're doing something right. All in all, final numbers for Bush include 18 total touchdowns, 2,611 all-purpose yards. For his downright insane season, Bush received numerous awards, but none bigger than the Heisman Award. Clearly, by this point, Bush is being touted as the next big thing for the NFL, and scouts and GMs alike were salivating at the idea of Reggie in their backfield. Fast forwarding to the 2006 draft, Bush himself believed he would hear his name called first to Houston. On the I Am Athlete podcast, Bush would say that, quote, "My agent had been talking to Houston's general manager, Charlie Casserly, throughout the entire process. I did not even interview with the other 31 teams because they were like, he's not going to be there." We now know that Houston overlooked Bush and chose defensive end Mario Williams. Long story short, the reason for this was that the Texans hired a private investigator, and the investigator came back saying that he was quote unquote a bad guy. Don't believe me? This came directly from the man himself on the Dan Patrick Show.
I was supposed to be the #1 draft pick. I don't know if you remember. Apparently it was because they hired a private investigator to investigate me during the Heisman Trophy debacle that was happening at that time. And the investigator came back and said that I was a bad guy, had bad character, I was a street kid, and that they shouldn't sign me, they shouldn't draft me.
That's neither here nor there though. The point is, he fell to the New Orleans Saints, and especially considering this was right after Hurricane Katrina, Bush was welcomed into the Big Easy with open arms. Beginning in his rookie year, the Heisman winner would make an immediate impact on the field as well as off the field. He would offer sales of his jersey to be donated to the victims of Katrina. To sum up his rookie season, it was definitely up and down to say the least. He would average just 3.6 yards per carry in a season where the average was 4 yards per carry, totaling just 565 yards on the ground. But this was countered with 88 receptions, totaling another 742 yards in the pass game. He would also have 216 return yards. In total, Bush would amass 1,523 all-purpose yards, finish 5th in Rookie of the Year voting, and the Saints would finish 10-6. 7 more wins than the year prior, and they would earn a trip to the playoffs, where they would make it all the way to the NFC Championship game, in a losing effort to the Bears. Not a bad rookie year at all. But even for a rookie, it did feel like something was missing. Even in the playoffs, although he had a few great splash plays, people only remember that Sheldon Brown hit. I think the absurd amount of hype on the guy definitely affected what people expected out of the 21-year-old rookie that was also playing in a tandem. 2007 was supposed to be a step in the right direction, but his stats were about the same. He had a 3.7 yards per carry average versus his 3.6 from last year, and would catch 73 passes for 417 yards. But his season would end after 12 games due to a torn PCL. In 2008, it seemed like it could be the year for Reggie to put it all together. He was on pace to hit highs everywhere. Things would sadly not work out this year either, as he would deal with more injuries that caused him to miss 6 games in total. Maybe it was still because of the hype from college, which at this point was 3 years removed now, but everyone felt that he was just on the brink of truly breaking out in the NFL. Like, he just needs that one memorable game, that one memorable moment to say, I'm here. If there was one thing that can stop an uber talented player, yes, I said uber, it's injuries. It was now 2 straight seasons that Bush wouldn't finish the campaign. I think by 2009 though, injuries had really begun to take a toll on his availability, and the Saints would use him much more sparingly this time around. This would result in career lows in almost every statistical category, with the one exception being, however, to his yards per carry. His YPC had gone well over 5 yards, and this transition to use him as more of a change of pace back proved worthwhile, especially during the playoffs. When the Saints met the Cardinals in the divisional, he would stack 84 yards on just 5 carries, and another 83 yards from a punt return for a touchdown. This game, to me anyway, showcased what the Saints were expecting when they drafted him 2nd overall. After the showing where he could show what he was truly capable of against the Cardinals, he was kind of a non-factor after that. Even in the Super Bowl, be honest with me y'all, Reggie Bush, despite being the big name that he was, is not the first or the second name you think of when you remember the Saints' Super Bowl win. Still, a win's a win, and Bush was technically a Super Bowl champion. Despite the highs of 2009, 2010 would be Bush's worst season, both on and off the field. See, it was during this time that the NCAA would strip him of his Heisman, as there was evidence of his family receiving benefits and gifts from sports agencies while still in college. Which in today's game, it doesn't sound like that's that crazy, considering NIL is running wild in the NCAA, but this was still a big deal, and as a result, Bush and USC were punished. Off the field issues aside, he would also only play in a total of 8 games due to more injuries, and would have his worst season as a professional, totaling just 358 yards in the pass and run game, where he'd score a single touchdown between both. By this point, the Saints had a reliable enough run game with Pierre Thomas and a young Chris Ivory leading the way, where they felt like Reggie was expendable, and they would trade the now technically 0-time Heisman winner to the Dolphins for an emergency safety and a 6th round draft pick swap. Oof. While it seemed like things were bleak for him when the trade happened, it may have been what saved his career from being a full-blown bust in the NFL. Between the 2011 and 2012 seasons, Bush would be 14 yards away from having back-to-back 1,000-yard campaigns with Miami. Outside of Brandon Marshall, I don't think there was a better player on offense for the Dolphins. Bush would accumulate 1,382 scrimmage yards and 7 total touchdowns, but the Dolphins would finish finish 6-10 in 2011. 2012 was a very similar season. Bush would finish with 986 rushing yards and another 292 in the pass game for a total of 8 touchdowns. But the Dolphins again would finish with a forgettable record, this time 7-9. While he was having a career renaissance, so to speak, with Miami, they decided to ultimately let him walk in free agency due to his age and injury history. Detroit would give him a shot and sign him to a 4-year, $16 million deal where the Lions hoped he could be their 3-down back. And it did seem like the perfect fit at first. Bush and the Lions were actually 3-1, but in typical Lions fashion, would lose most of their remaining games and would finish 7-9. Bush, however, would still record his second 1,000-yard season, which all told was 1,512 scrimmage yards, the most of his career, and 7 total touchdowns. This, ladies and gentlemen, was the peak of the man's career. As in 2014, the Lions' other running back, Jacques Bell, would ascend and handle a much bigger workload, leaving Bush as the change of pace back again. Despite still being useful in the passing game, he managed a career low in rushing yards with just 297. And from here, his numbers would drop even more in the 2015 season. The Lions would cut their losses and set Bush to find another team. That team came in the form of the 49ers, where his time is best known for slipping on concrete in a game against the Rams, where he'd ultimately suffer a season-ending meniscus tear. His final season would come when he would sign a 1-year deal with the Bills, and the only thing memorable about his time with the Bills is that he technically had less rushing yards than you or me ever did in the NFL, with a -3 total off 12 carries. But he did still manage a touchdown, so good for him for that. Following 2016, Bush would officially call it quits from the NFL, where he would finish with 5,490 total rushing yards, 3,598 receiving yards, 929 return yards, and 58 total touchdowns. He didn't earn any Pro Bowl nods, nor did he receive any All-Pro honors, but he was a Super Bowl champion. Bush's career, for as up and down as it was, did at least last 10 seasons. As much as some guys make it seem easy, the average career length of an NFL player is about 3.3 years. But he was still a number 2 overall pick who didn't live up to the hype. The team that drafted him decided in 4 years that he was not their answer. And while he had flashes, the highlight reel plays were just too few and far between for most of his career. His best season, which I would say was 2011 with the Dolphins, was still not a spectacular season when you see where he finished among his peers. He would finish 10th in rushing yards and 12th in catches and 19th in receiving yards. Again, not insane numbers, and yet this was still the peak for a guy who was so damn hyped, considering he was one of, if not the greatest player in college history. Given where he was drafted, his peak, the length of his career, and his contribution to a Super Bowl win, if I had to give the career of Reggie Bush a grade, it would have to be a C. But also on the bright side, he was given back his Heisman relatively recently, so we can end this video on a bright note. But what do you guys think? What grade would you guys give the career of Reggie Bush in the NFL? Be sure to thumbs up this video, and if you made it this far, please consider subscribing. We're on the road to 3,000 subs. Thank you guys so much for your support, but until next time, ship boy!